The starry sky rose directly above the exquisite castle. It was impressive with its scale and evoked thoughts about the wealthy status of the people living here. The cherry blossoms, with their delicate smell, attracted birds from everywhere. And also the girl, whose silhouette was visible in the window, could not look away from them, thinking about something completely different. In a cozy room with a stylish design, lying on her king-sized bed, the girl thought about the passing of time. The young lady in the white nightgown could not believe that so much time had passed, 2 Sundays. Her long blonde hair covered the blanket in waves. Looking up at the ceiling and bringing her eyebrows together with despair in her eyes, the only thoughts in her head were the eternal sleep from which she could not get out. Therefore, sitting on the edge and shaking her hair, she did not want to accept it as the truth. The silhouettes from the shadows on the walls made it clear that it was late, and the girl still couldn't calm down. Coma, vision, dream. She considered any possible option. Still, she hoped for the third, which would turn out to be a long and interesting dream that she would remember for a long time. Bitter tears gathered in the corner of her eye, and her hands trembled from the comical situation in which she found herself. It so happened that the girl got into the novel and also in the role of a thief. In a moment of anger, without calculating her strength, she hit her little finger on the leg of the table near the bed. The pain was so excruciating that she seemed to be torn apart and falling in pieces to the bottom. However, he helped her soberly assess the situation. She realized that such pain cannot be confused with anything. So curled up on the floor, she tried to calm him down, breathing deeply. Putting slippers on her feet, she decided not to whine or be sad over little things. Getting up, the girl walked past the night, powerful moon that was visible in the window. It illuminated the room and made it possible to navigate in the dark. "Is it true?" she asked. Everything around seemed so calm and melancholy. Her eyes, the color of emeralds, looked into the night distance, and her hair swayed in a light breeze. As if painted, the stars rose high in the sky, and the mountain range stretched along the entire kingdom. The girl still could not realize that she was in such an extraordinary place. However, one still cannot fully enjoy the local impressive architecture and picturesque scenery. With sadness in her eyes, she folded her arms, leaning on the railing. After all, this is where she will die. On the pages of this bloody novel, in this unusual, fabulous world, a girl in a long crimson dress with a delicate, transparent fan, Lucia Avelius, is the main antagonist of the work, a thief who does evil things. The same tyrant who will regret her actions, having lost everything that was important to her, being left with nothing. The first loss that started the terrible fate of the heroine was her beloved fiancé. The next, no less painful, was the loss of her dignity, which spread rumors and turned close people away from her. And finally, as happens with most villains, loss of life. This is the final event that destroyed and shattered the main character. Returning to consciousness from her creepy thoughts, the girl stood in the middle of the room looking at her own luxurious portrait that hung in her bedroom. She could not come to terms with future events. She considered them so treacherous and unfair. Therefore, shedding tears, she almost tore her own hair. After all, it's not all about her. The girl took the slipper off her foot and threw it right into the majestic picture with her portrait, trying at least somehow to calm the anger. She is a simple girl from the 21st generation who lived her own life in solitude. The young lady is not used to a luxurious life living in a castle. That's why it all put pressure on her. And especially the fact that she is a calm, reasonable person. Currently, she has to play the role of a thief. It was such a foreign and distant concept for her. Sitting down on the gilded sofa and tucking my legs under me, she stared blankly at the floor, not understanding what she had done wrong. But she knew for sure, whatever the reason, this was not the place where she should be. The girl does not feel free and happy. This is not her home, not her life. In her real life, she had a friend with whom they were not spilled water. The friend published her own book, which made the heroine very happy. She has already caught a few spoilers. She had dreams and goals that she worked so hard to achieve. For days and nights, the girl did not get up from her desk. She did not give up. She overcame difficulties to achieve results. The heroine spent her free time in the library, studying everything she could. She worked overtime to the point of dizziness and nosebleeds, but even that did not stop her. Currently, looking back, she does not understand why this colossal work was done. Neglected her life in order to perish in the world of some novel? She felt lost and did not know what to do next. However, the strong-willed heroine refused the fate prepared for her. She wasn't going to give up halfway. There are difficulties in life, but this is no reason to give up. Therefore, sitting down at a small table in the middle of the room, she took a pen in her hands and decided to write everything she knew about this novel. The main plot of the novel begins with the engagement of the prince. The main character appears for the first time at the festive banquet. However, these events are still a month away. The best solution would be to avoid meeting all the main characters, in order not to get into a plot where creepy things happen to her. However, the world of this bloody novel can force her to follow the script. She could not avoid the development of such events and think everything in advance. Her maids couldn't understand her for the last 2 weeks. The heroine constantly refused food and slowly went mad. According to the plot, the thief did not have any problems with his head. Having chased away intrusive thoughts, the girl again focused on the novel, namely on the main characters. First of all, you need to remember them all. 4 handsome men who will appear in the whole work, and each of them will have to perform their own role. The girl fell into despair, realizing her colossal mistake. She did not read the entire novel. Only the spoilers attracted her attention. Therefore, the unfolding of all subsequent events was unknown to her. Based on the spoilers she read, the first is the knight who will kill Lucia, 2 half-brothers who hate her, and the groom, the crown prince to whom they will be engaged. There are only 4 main characters, which greatly pleased the heroine. The stars that appeared in her eyes testified to the hope of avoiding all pitfalls without any effort. If you think about it, she lives with her brothers right now, and avoiding the prince will not work because he is her fiancé. It would be strange if she was cold towards him for some reason. Thoughts swirled around all the heroes. She could not stop the flow of these thoughts. Grabbing her head, the heroine did not understand how she would be able to deftly avoid everyone at once. Dropping her hands down, the exhausted girl leaned over the desk. Building strategies took away her strength. So, accepting the fact that avoiding everyone at once will not work, she decided to find a new way that would really work in this situation. After looking at the list of main characters again, I decided that I would start with the prince. When the sun rose above, and the flowers on the trees returned to the top, it indicated the beginning of a new day. The sun's rays reflected from the small comb in the hands of the maid, who was helping Lucia with her outfit for the walk to the estate. The red-haired girl inquired about Lady's well-being. Is she feeling well for the walk to the castle? She was very worried, it was reflected in her eyes, because the young lady did not get out of bed all Sunday. She was afraid that she might get sick again. However, with a slight smile on her face, the brunette assured Linda that her condition had improved, so she may not worry. Deep down, she worried whether her speech was sophisticated for the era. Everything was so foreign to her. She could not easily get used to a new culture in all its aspects. For example, when other people dress you, it is very uncomfortable and embarrassing. Linda sighed with relief and reminded of the meeting with the prince, which will take place very soon. She was sure that the girl had missed His Majesty very much all these days. However, the fear reflected in Lucia's eyes spoke of something completely different. The aide with blonde hair continued to stand in silence, while Linda kept escalating the situation by pointing out the imminent engagement with the prince and their inevitable discussion. She agreed with all the words of the maid, but her trembling hands betrayed her agitated state. Looking at her reflection, right in the eyes, she tried to pull herself together and really adjust to the upcoming conversation with the future groom. After all, today the girl decided to start implementing her plan and take the first step to change the plot events. That is, the termination of the engagement with the crown prince, which will pave the way for her to create new events and plot twists, with the help of which she will be able to change the terrible fate of the main character. On the same day, she went directly to the castle in a luxurious royal carriage. However, suddenly the wheels caught on the stones scattered on the path, which led to a slight shaking. The girl was shaken and was a little surprised by the condition of the road. After the maids had done her elaborate hair and dressed her in a delicate pastel dress, she was on her way to the castle. This is the first time that Lucia travels in a carriage. Surprisingly, it turned out to be very uncomfortable. Of course, because she is not used to this way of moving. By the way, this is also the first time she broke off an engagement. The girl would have laughed if the situation had not been so absurd. This is a painful place for her because she has never had a boyfriend. And outside the window, there was already a wonderful view of the bustling city in which life continued. Lucia's eyes became like buttons from surprise, because it is not every day that you see such a simple but cozy area. She, holding her breath, looked at the local residents who continued to live at their own pace. Everyone was doing their own thing, and it was impressive. There were so many people, her eyes widened. Therefore, almost not falling out of the carriage, she continued to look at this beauty. It was cozy here, and there was a warm breeze that you want to enjoy every moment. Even pets could afford to roam the streets freely. She decided that she would definitely come back here for a walk and drove away without even noticing the ashen, silent boy somewhere on the side of the bench. Now she should once again make sure of the perfection of her plan. The first and easiest thing on her list is getting to the royal castle. But the most important thing is to be able to cancel the engagement without any problems. If all goes well and the prince agrees to her proposal, she survives and her plan begins to be realized. However, on the other hand, he can refuse and everything will go to pieces. After all, in this case, the events will unfold according to the plot. The girl's eyes nearly bulged out of her forehead from such terrible thoughts. She did not take this fact into account at all, and did not even consider it as a possible option for the unfolding of events. However, she did not have time to think about it, because the castle was already visible outside the window. He was great. Driving along a long, wide path straight to the palace gates, she looked at the garden that decorated the building's grounds. The estate itself had a luxurious appearance and occupied a large area. Because of the summer weather, the balconies and windows were open, so a warm breeze could slip into the room. Inside, everything was at the highest level. Family portraits decorated the walls, and on the floor there were many vases and flowers that set the mood and soothed. The maid greeted Lucia and approached her. She brought a huge tray with fragrant tea and sweets to go with it. The maid informed that the crown prince would arrive soon, so the girl had a few minutes to pull herself together and go through the plan once more. She still could not believe that all this was happening in reality, so clutching the dress in her hands, she tried to cope with the panic. Now that she was here, everything scared her even more. Clenching her teeth, the girl felt fear pass through her body. Suddenly, there was a sound from somewhere on the side, which attracted Lucia's attention. She turned her head and looked in front of her in surprise. It was a cute little bird sitting on the bars of its own cage. She seemed so fragile and was able to give the girl a drop of peace. Lucia was sure that the crown prince would agree to break off the engagement, because that was what her heart told her. However, disturbing thoughts did not leave her. She knew that the prince had the same attitude towards the wedding as she did, so he had no reason to refuse her offer. Therefore, setting herself in the right order, she waited for the bridegroom. Suddenly, the door slowly opened and someone's silhouette appeared in it. A tall, stately man with broad shoulders, dressed in royal attire. He had eyes the color of his chocolate hair and looked straight at her. Their eyes met for a moment. This handsome man is the main character of this stormy novel. He is her fiancé with whom they should be engaged. But here is the man standing, looking Lucia straight in the eyes. Finally, sitting down on a comfortable royal sofa, she looked directly at the crown prince, who was located opposite. She tried to focus her attention on him. He inquired about her well-being, but he apologized for not visiting her when she was not feeling well. Lucia said that there is nothing wrong with that, because she knows how busy he can be. She noticed his politeness even if he was not happy to see her, and for her it was a very good sign. So taking a deep breath, she tried to bring up the topic of engagement. The prince immediately became irritated and again informed her that they would not be able to celebrate the wedding earlier, because it would take a lot of time. However, the girl interrupted him with her desperate cry that she wanted to break off the engagement. Shock was reflected on the man's face. He was petrified and considered the words she said. Suddenly, there was silence between them. Everyone was thinking about his own. Lucia expected a positive reaction, but the man still could not believe what was said. Only a light breeze made the noise that was now so loud in this room filled with silence. With eyes full of shock, the man asked again, because he could not accept the truth of these words. So the girl, biting her lips and looking straight into his soul, tearfully said that she wanted to break off the engagement and cancel the wedding. Surprise appeared on the man's face instantly. He did not even expect to hear such words from a young lady in delicate dresses who was to become his future bride. He was still troubled by such an unexpected desire to break off the engagement. The girl arched an eyebrow and, as if mocking, looked directly at the prince. She knew he didn't love her and was unlikely ever to. In addition, he also did not burn with the desire to marry her. He could not understand how she had guessed that he did not truly love her. Perhaps his whole behavior or manner of communication gave him away. but it was already too late to think about it. The worst thing that can happen is not a happy married couple. She would marry because of force, and therefore she would be unhappy. In addition, she is sure that the crown prince will not have any serious problems with finding a new bride. Therefore, with a clear conscience, she could say it directly to his face. She was convinced that there was no escape from the inevitable fate, and the meeting of the prince and the new main character would be very soon. However, she had absolutely no desire to insert sticks into the wheels. After all, not all stories need a bad ending, and in this case, the role of the antagonist was not apartment. There was silence again. The sun's rays warmed with their warmth and played on the carpet. The man, supporting his head with his hand, seriously thought about the girl's speech. Lucia silently waited for his answer, but this long silence played with her nerves. It is certain that her words surprised him very much, and he needed time to think. However, she did not understand why he was pulling, because he was also not happy about their engagement. The girl thought that he would immediately agree to her proposal. Steam was already coming from her ears. She was losing patience. The girl dreamed of hearing that he was abandoning her, and each of them was going their separate ways. After all, according to the plot, sooner or later he would have done this to her. She just wanted to speed up the upcoming divorce. She shuddered at the unexpected positive answer. The crown prince agreed to break off the engagement. Speaking these words, he seemed to sparkle in the sun like a precious stone. He could finally tell the truth that he had no desire to marry her. She modestly thanked them for solving this issue together. However, she was annoyed by how happy he was. The man, saying that he would be able to prepare all the necessary documents, informed the girl that they would share this news at the royal banquet where she should be present. Lucia did not remember anything about the banquet. Although she didn't care where to report the break-off of the engagement, the sooner the better. Therefore, she immediately agreed, because she was ready for anything to fulfill her plan. Lucia said goodbye to the prince and left the castle. Everything looked even more fabulous. Fragrant flowers bloomed on the territory, and colorful butterflies circled above them. The happy girl quickly ran up the stairs, full of emotions, because she wanted to leave the territory of the castle as soon as possible. She still couldn't believe that she had done it. The first point of her plan has already started to become a reality. In fact, it turned out to be so unexpectedly easy, because in her head she scrolled through all possible options for the development of events. And there was nothing to worry about. The prince radiated universal joy in his whole appearance when he learned that he could get rid of her. Therefore, due to this mutual desire in this situation, it was in her hands. She finally breathed a sigh of relief that it was all over. If you think about it, this is probably her last visit to the kingdom, and she won't be able to come back here again. Therefore, I decided to take advantage of the opportunity and inspect the estate from all sides, because such an opportunity does not arise every day. She decided that nothing important should happen if she stayed, although she was not 100% sure of this. And on the knight's training ground already with the sunrise, the sounds of swords could be heard. Young guys from morning to evening spent their free time here. Tired young men, swords in hand, competed in a duel. The guy with dark red hair was much more skilled with a sword. Therefore, he easily defeated his opponent. Suddenly, he brought his weapon over his head, and with a quick swing of his sword knocked his sword out of his opponent's hands. The sword suddenly disappeared from the hands of the man whose hair looked like sunflowers, much to his surprise. A long-haired boy with eyes the color of an ocean in which you could drown announced the defeat of the enemy and was very happy that the battle was over. The blonde was stunned, amazed at his masterful swordsmanship, and acted like a loyal fan. The elder praised his ward and pointed out weaknesses that still need to be worked on. The young man thanked him for the duel and will definitely listen to his advice. They use wooden but still massive weapons, so the guy should try to move faster. The man had also faced this problem before, so he wanted to teach someone else. But not today, because the maid has already come looking for him. The guy twisted his face, expecting a grumpy tone from the woman. Lady Mary, a red-haired maiden who was the royal governess. She was terribly angry because she had spent a lot of time looking for him. Nearby, people discussed the approach of the lady. It seems that this was already the third time on Sunday that the master was caught again. So it's surprising that someone like him has the gift of disappearing and covering his tracks. Leaving the training area, the woman could not stop teaching the boy. She knew that he liked to escape from the castle, but there was no way to skip classes anymore. Parabok did not think much about the words he said and tried to appease her. The lady remained somber and focused because she was talking about important things. He tried to powder her head to avoid class, but flattery wasn't going to make him miss this time. Insisting on her point, the lady called the boy after her. He gave up, but it was worth trying. Because the spring weather is nice outside, she allowed him to practice here, and ordered to follow her until she changed her mind. The boy slowly followed her. The mysterious man turned out to be a prince whose brother was soon to become king. Therefore, he will have many new responsibilities that he will not be able to avoid. She looked at him with a serious look, saying that the boy should take this seriously. After all, in case of a terrible disaster, he will be the next nominee for the throne. In order to prevent this from happening, the guy should pull himself together and become more serious. The governess believed that all those knights around whom he often hangs around have a bad influence on him. She had recently heard the prince call a member of the council Baron a raisin. This infuriated her. She knew that he was not happy with the council members, but still, in the royal court, he had to behave with dignity and accordingly. The guy felt uncomfortable during the woman's monologue. He does not allow himself such a relationship with others and use bad words. Suddenly, the woman broke down and a stream of curses poured out of her, which surprised the prince very much. They approached the magical garden, which at this time bloomed with red, fragrant roses. In the distance, the woman noticed Lucia, which surprised her. I couldn't understand what this snake was doing here. And the girl at that time enjoyed the atmosphere and wandered along the paths of the garden, without paying attention to the whole surrounding world. The boy could not take his eyes off the girl in the beautiful dress. He didn't expect to see her here. The lady still continued to talk about the young lady, but she was annoyed even before she became the new queen. Looking away, her mouth fell open in surprise because the prince instantly disappeared. Wandering through the garden, Lucia was still reflecting on the events of the long day. The prince not only agreed to her proposal, but also took the initiative in preparing the necessary documents. This day could not have been better. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a cat was heard meowing. The girl adored cats, so when she heard that there was an animal nearby, she made sure that the day became many times better. A small, fluffy white ball was sitting on a tall, stout tree making cat-like sounds. On his head was a big red bow. The girl was scared. The kitten was stuck in a tree and was shaking with fear. The girl tried to find a way to help him. However, she herself was in a dress and did not consider the idea of climbing alone. The kitten looked into her eyes with a pleading look. It begged for help. As a cat lover, the girl couldn't resist those huge eyes that begged for rescue. Therefore, setting her priorities correctly, she decided that the dress would not prevent her from climbing the tree and taking the cat. She resolutely headed in his direction. Grabbing a small branch with one hand, she began to climb up. Standing on an unstable branch in front of her, she was able to see the little cat more clearly. Mentally begging not to fall from this tree, she almost reached for the top branch. However, as soon as she grabbed a branch, she heard a crack under her hand. Lucia's whole life flashed before her eyes. Due to a broken branch, she fell from the tree directly to the bottom. Unexpectedly, she felt a gentle touch on her skin that definitely couldn't have happened when she landed on the ground. Strong hands gripped the girl, and she still could not open her eyes. Daring, she opened her eyelids and saw in front of her a mysterious, handsome man, who held her as if she weighed nothing. A blue-eyed man with soft red hair smiled at the absurdity of this situation. With this smile, he gave peace. At the same time, it made him nervous. The girl's cheeks turned pink. She did not expect such a turn of events, and she also lost her speech because of the picture she saw in front of her. The gallant man politely inquired about her well-being. He seemed to her a good-natured and good young man. Burning with shame, the girl thanked him for his help and tried to justify herself by saying that she wanted to save the cat that was sitting high in the tree. The man, not understanding which cat the girl was talking about, glanced at the tree and asked again. The girl just wanted to point to the animal but did not find it there. The little fur was already sitting on a blade of grass and enjoying the warm, sunny rays. His mocking smile spread across his face. Laughing, the man pointed to the cat and asked if it was the one the girl was talking about, and at that time she was speechless from surprise. On his forepaws, he turned and headed away, satisfied with his work. The guy continued to laugh casually, and the girl was as if in water. She was seething with anger. She didn't understand why this cat decided to make fun of her like that. After all, she sincerely worried about him and wanted to help. The guy gazed at her fascinated while Lucia was filled with thoughts. In time, the boy asked in a light tone if Lady was in a hurry, but does she like to stay right here? Namely, in his strong, reliable arms. These words gave the girl goosebumps and she could not utter any words. Frightened, with a funny grimace, she apologized and asked to put her on the ground because she had to go further. When she got to her feet, the girl felt a pain in her back. Luckily, she only tore her sleeve. After thanking her husband, she addressed him as Sir. The man was not at all surprised by this appeal, so he asked if Lady Lucia had forgotten him. The girl had no idea where and under what circumstances she could be acquainted with this knight. Many questions were swirling in her head. Who is this man? Was he intimate with the real Lady Lucia, and did he appear in the novel? These thoughts swirled like a spinning top in her head. She couldn't remember. Too many events for one day. It was all very exhausting and her brain refused to work. However, she did not want to appear a fool and answered this question with uncertainty. She said that of course she remembers. However, she could not remember his name. The guy turned it all into a joke. He understood that there was no way she could forget her beautiful future brother-in-law. That is, it turns out that this knight who just saved her from falling from a tree is the same brother of the crown prince. The shocked girl froze in place. The future events of the novel began to return to her thoughts. It turns out that this is the same brother of the prince, Leonardo Felix. People call him the Raspberry Lion. And from the spoilers she read, the girl knows that this background character, who was very rarely mentioned during the plot, is a cold-blooded general. A ruthless person who spares no one. A fierce warrior and protector of the kingdom who will do anything for it. The girl came to her senses and barely swallowed her saliva from fear. She was afraid of doing something wrong and giving away that she knew what kind of person he really was. She bowed to the prince, addressing him as Your Highness. The girl was not sure if she was doing everything right. Suddenly, Leonardo took her hand and slowly brought it to his lips. The girl accidentally blushed from this situation and did not know where to turn. However, the kiss was interrupted by the voice of the governess, who said that his teacher was already waiting for the prince and he needed to start his lessons. Maria looked contemptuously at the young people and, like thunder from a clear sky, greeted Lady Lucia. The girl was seized with chills. She could not even move. She was suddenly thrown into the cold and she could barely keep from crying. The man with a slight smile embraced the girl. He informed the lady that he would return as soon as he had escorted the lady to her carriage. It was evening outside. Calmly walking down the path, the man began the conversation by apologizing if he had accidentally offended her. However, he couldn't help but joke. Lucia said everything was fine. The knight surmised that she had come to the royal palace to discuss matters concerning her betrothal to her beloved bridegroom. However, with a light sigh, the girl informed her brother-in-law that nothing else connects her and the crown prince, and today is exactly the day when she called off the engagement. Leonardo looked at her wide, sincere smile and could not believe what he had just heard. Soft, fluffy clouds rose above the castle. Young people approached the carriage so that the girl could go home. Standing by the carriage, the prince asked the young lady how often they would now be able to see each other. The girl will come to the royal palace less often, and in fact she does not even have a reason to return here now. With disappointment in his eyes and voice, the prince looked directly at the beautiful Lucia. At that time, the girl told His Highness that it was already time for her to go. So stepping on the first step to climb into the carriage, the prince took her arm like a gallant man to help. The girl swayed slightly. She gasped when she felt the touch of his hand, and at that time he inquired about her well-being. A gentle breeze swayed their hair, and their hands held tightly together. The girl looked into the eyes of the young knight and could not believe that he could actually be a cruel executioner. With a slight smile on her face, the girl said that she felt better than ever in her life. As she ascended the steps, she said goodbye to His Highness, and her hand slipped from his warm palm. And the prince remained standing in the city looking at his hand, which still had the ghostly breath of her palm. Leaving the wonderful area, she looked at it and dreamed in her mind that she would have the opportunity to visit it again in the future. Lucia stretched from fatigue. It was a long day, but at the same time productive and eventful. She successfully canceled the engagement and can go home with peace of mind. Everything went according to plan, which could not but please the girl. Therefore, clapping her hands, she smiled widely and was proud of herself. If you don't take into account the situation in the kindergarten, where she almost fell from the tree trying to save the cat. Wincing at the thought of the possible consequences of the fall, The girl thanked that it did not happen. Fortunately, a second prince appeared nearby and saved the poor woman from hitting the hard ground, who was surprisingly so nice and easy to talk to. It seemed as if nothing bothered him, and he lived without any worries. It was very different from the information that was in the novel. Still, something was bothering her, and she couldn't understand what exactly. She believed that she could pass by minor details. If she could go back in time and read the entire novel carefully, that would be great. The girl was very angry with herself for only being interested in spoilers. Now that the problem with the main character was solved, she was wondering what to do with the next two, namely stepbrothers, Alexander and Theodore Avelius. Their family adopted the girl when she was still a child. Although she was older than her two brothers, all her father's attention went to her alone. The Duke admired his daughter so much that he raised her to be a spoiled girl who got everything she wanted. In the end, while the girl grew in love, she was bathed in gifts and received overtime attention. The younger brothers grew up alone, not receiving support from their father and gradually drifting away from him. Therefore, it is not surprising that when the boys grew up, they hated their half-sister. After all, she took everything that should have reached them. It's just not fair. Currently, she could meet only with Alexander. Younger brother Theodore is studying at the Royal Academy and should not be returning anytime soon. In the novel, the dark-haired man was described as a troublemaker, but the girl did not remember exactly for what reasons. While the king is away, he is responsible for the kingdom. Therefore, most often he works in his office. You cannot see him so often. It was very easy to stay out of his sight for the past 2 Sundays. However, if you think about it, he was the first person she met when she got into the novel. One evening, when it was raining and thundering outside, he carried her unconscious in his arms to the castle. She did not remember all the events, but it seemed that he was worried about her. After all, his whole appearance and the tone with which he begged to help the girl as soon as possible testified to this very fact. Returning to reality, the girl dismissed the thoughts because at the moment it is not important. She is not who he thinks she is. Therefore, she should continue to keep her distance from him. But it will not be so difficult because the older brother almost never leaves his office. Luckily, the younger brother isn't even in the castle, so that will be easy too. With these thoughts, the carriage drove up to the open gate. Sitting in a nice dress at dinner, the girl thought that everything would go well, and difficulties should not arise. However, a problem named Theodore was sitting nearby, and this did not bode well. The beautiful, blue-eyed blonde who was her younger brother unexpectedly returned from the academy and sat next to her and didn't say a word either. The red-haired governess informed that Alexander, unfortunately, will not be able to join the dinner because he has a lot of unfinished business in the city, so it will be late. She also admitted that Mr. Theodore's return was very unexpected. At that moment, the girl was panicking inside because she also had no idea why he had suddenly returned. The upset girl, who was not ready for such a plot twist, barely held back her tears. The brother was supposed to appear after her engagement to the prince. The atmosphere at the table did not bode well. Everyone present felt tense and awkward. According to Lucia, it would be right to say hello to the prince, because this heroine has not seen him for a long time. However, as soon as she spoke to him, the boy turned pale and thumped on the table. He instantly got up from his chair and clenched his fists in anger. The maid was worried that the dishes were not to the taste of the young prince. She offered him to taste other dishes that they had prepared. However, he threw an angry look at Lucia and refused, having said that he lost his appetite. At that time, he almost made a hole in Lucia's face with a murderous cold look. The confused girl pressed her lips tightly and silently waited for the next action. The man got up from the table and left the dining room, saying that he would be in his office, having told Linda that he does not want anyone to distract him from work, not even his brother. But he left the room slamming the door. The girl was frightened by this sound, which echoed from the walls of the luxurious room. It turned out to be an awkward situation. Lucia didn't even expect that the reaction to her words would be that Theodore would get angry and explode like a match. However, he loses a lot. The food tastes so wonderful that the young lady does not know how she could refuse it. Having already met with 2 brothers, the girl realized that Alexander by himself is a nicer person. Suddenly, a risky and strange idea occurred to her. The girl asked Lida whether Alexander would definitely come late in the evening. Linda nodded her head. Therefore, leaving the table with fragrant, wonderful-looking dishes, the girl left the room. When the sky was covered with stars and the flashlights were already turned on in the rooms, On a small wooden table was a delicious night snack, as well as a small note. First of all, the man's attention was drawn to a white piece of paper, so taking it in his hands, he found out from whom he received such a pleasant surprise. The note indicated that Lady Lucia had asked for fragrant croissants and a decanter of fresh brew to be sent directly to his room. The man glanced at the snack that was delivered to his room and could not believe that Lucia had done this for him because this is the first time this has happened. 2 weeks have passed. The buds turned into flowers and the leaves continued to stretch towards the sky. A girl was lying on the carpet in the middle of the room, spending her free time with a book. However, she quickly got bored and rejected her side. After all, reading a book while in a book looked absurd. The girl sat in the room for 2 Sundays, then slowly went crazy. After all, as soon as she left it, she could immediately face one of the brothers, so she hid in it so as not to catch their eyes. She explored every corner, every crevice in this room. That's why staying here disgusted her. She needed to get out of these apartments and take a walk, or she would go crazy. Resolutely heading for the door, she decided to turn this idea into reality and go to get some fresh air, preferably without running into her brothers. Linda is confused by the fact that the young lady should do this. She informed the girl that there are many enemies around who can kidnap her, so it would be a bad idea to walk without protection. With a slight smile on her face, Lucia assured the governess that everything would be fine and nothing would happen to her. Linda advised her to take a carriage because if Alexander finds out about her antics, he will not be happy. With little stars in her eyes and a sincere smile on her face, the girl assured her that she would not take the carriage precisely so that he would not find out, so it would be their secret. She asked not to tell anyone that she had left the palace and promised to return home safe and sound. A happy girl who went outside for the first time in 2 weeks, opened the gate and headed for adventures. Having walked a long way, which did not seem difficult to her because of sweet expectations, the girl entered a town where life was bustling and time did not matter. A fair was held on the main square of the city, where people sold various things, and buyers could not help but buy everything. Here was a woman selling fabrics that came from the western part of the kingdom, and here a gallant man who was a baker was selling fresh baked goods just out of the oven. Someone sold roses, someone sold dairy products, and children played catch-up games and ran with big smiles, chasing away pigeons. The happy girl did not understand why she had not done this earlier. Why didn't she come to the city and start enjoying her new life? The bright settlement is full of life, makes you feel happy and needed. For a moment, she even forgot that she was in a novel, and would never have thought that she would be able to say such a thing. More often than not, we read books to hide from reality, but not the other way around. However, for these people, it's all real. An uninvented fairy tale novel that is written on the pages and a happy, carefree life. A blonde woman in a red scarf with a bright smile was selling fresh strawberries picked since the morning. Hearing this, Lucia was very happy. Strawberry is her favorite berry. The berries were so wonderful and large that the girl took a whole bag. Without even taking the rest, she left the store and walked on with a happy smile. The saleswoman looked after her in surprise. The girl decided that today she will have a vacation, a day of rest when she doesn't worry about anything and doesn't think about all sorts of little things. An ordinary day in an unfamiliar place where she explores cultural sites, enjoys the noise of local residents, and happily spends her day. Too bad she didn't have a camera with her. Lucia could take wonderful photos that would warm her in the future and could allow her to be transported back to this carefree day. It was evening outside. The girl spent a wonderful day enjoying the beauty, observing the behavior and life of the locals. Finding a bench in a quiet part of the town, she sat down to rest. It suddenly got dark. The scorching sun hid behind the moon and the streetlights turned on outside. A fountain roared behind. The girl remembered all the events of the day and was grateful that she had the opportunity to see it with her own eyes. It was a great day, fun and easy. However, looking at those happy people who spent time with their family or friends, she felt so lonely. She missed her life very much, so it was not fabulous or fun. She had to work hard for the future. However, whatever it was, it still remained her life. What worried her the most at this moment was returning home. She did not know how she could find a way out of this novel and return to reality. Voices from outside brought her out of her melancholy state. She shuddered at the appeal of this haughty male voice. In front of her stood 3 local boys, and the one in the middle was wondering what such a young lady was doing here late at night. The girl tensed and did not know what to do. She understood that it is better not to rush to such men. At that moment, she jumped off the bench and headed in the opposite direction from them. However, they kept up with her and followed her footsteps. The brunette teased with his suggestion to go and have a little fun with them. The girl firmly stood her ground, saying that she was not interested. However, he suddenly squeezed her shoulder tightly, causing pain, but still stood his ground. Lucia is not one of those who will tolerate such an attitude and repeated her words with an angry face. The man went beyond all limits again, grabbing her by the hand, forcing her to go with them while he was still good. Spinning in place, Lucia screamed for him to let her go. But unable to keep her balance, she flew down again. She did not understand why in any situation she starts to fall, either from a tree or like now. Having come to terms with this, she mentally prepared herself for a fall. Suddenly, someone's strong hands and black gloves wrapped around her waist and saved her from falling. There was silence for a second. She looked up and saw her savior. The man was taller than her by a head, holding her tightly and standing motionless, as if she weighed like a feather. And again she found herself in such a situation. His hand gently slid into her palm. She stared at his cold, expressionless expression and was in a state of shock. The man with the white hair and black cape remained calm and composed. The voice of the annoying brunette, whose friends stood by silently all the time, brought him out of his dream state. Apparently he was the leader of their gang. He asked what he was doing with his wife. She turned to Mr. in Black, saying that she did not know these people. But with anger in her voice, she shouted that she was not this man's wife, clutching the mysterious man's pants in her hands. The man behind Lucia was surprised by the girl's impulse, but with a slight smile on his face, he looked at the top of her head. He firmly grasped her hand, giving her silent support. The local man was already getting annoyed. He assured her that she would not want to see him get angry. However, he barely had time to say the last word when he was met with cold eyes. Behind the girl, like her shield, the man squinted his eyes and seemed to kill the three boys with a look who froze in fear. For several minutes in a row, the young men kicked their heels, frightened by the stern, silent, handsome man. Great, thought the girl. Now they are running away. And before that, she couldn't drive them away. The man caught hold of a lock of her hair and examined it carefully. She turned to thank the young man, but there was no sign of him. A man in a dark robe walked calmly down the street. He left the girl behind, deciding that the situation had improved. However, when he went down the stairs, he suddenly stopped and wondered if they could come back, if she would be okay. Behind her, Lucia was catching up with her husband. She was running up the stairs, shouting appeals to him. Then he realized that everything was fine with her. She barely caught up with him and could not utter a word, because it was difficult to speak after a long, intense run. Finally catching her breath, she thanked the stranger with a bright smile because if it weren't for him, she would have been in trouble. The man waited a few seconds because he could not understand what exactly she wanted to thank him for, because he did nothing. If you think about it, he really didn't do anything, he just stood by. However, even this was enough for the pagans to quickly flee in an unknown direction. He really has a terrifying appearance, because without saying anything, his look can make you feel awkward. Despite this fact, Lucia felt safe with him, and even without saying anything, the touch of his hand was reassuring and supportive. The girl wanted to follow her husband. He did not understand why she was following him. The young lady decided to inquire whether he was a knight or a soldier, because his behavior and physique indicated that he had good physical training. He said not yet. The girl was even more interested in this answer and wanted to learn new information about this mysterious man. But he stopped and looked at the girl with an irritated look. The young man did not understand why she was following him and what she wanted from him. At first glance, she seemed like such a frivolous person who wanted to get right into his soul. The man hesitated with the answer for a few seconds, and then said that he would like to, because knights are paid a lot. He quickened his pace and moved on. The girl stopped and thought about his words. The guy didn't understand how reckless you had to be to follow a stranger into the forest and pester him with questions. That is, as she understood, this young man wants to become a knight only for the sake of receiving large sums of money. If you think about it like that, Lucia was a very wealthy woman. She had everything she wanted and money poured in from heaven. However, there is something she does not have. This is a personal knight who would be her bodyguard and accompany her on her morning walks into the city whenever she wanted. A crazy idea came into her head and she quickened her pace to catch up with the young man. In the meantime, they had already reached a dark, dense forest that hid its secrets. The man stopped for a moment when he heard that the girl was catching up with him. He couldn't let her follow him, much less go into the darkness of the night. Sighing, he turned to say he would walk her to her house. However, he could no longer say a word out of surprise because the girl was running right at him. Lucia flew in front of her with her eyes closed, and the savior grabbed her firmly so that she would not be hit when she fell. Lying on the cold ground among the flowers, she apologized for tripping and flying right at him. However, the girl quickly got up and asked again if he wanted to become a knight. The man gave a positive answer. After the fall, he couldn't focus on the girl's face, but he clearly heard the offer to become her personal knight. He continued to look at the girl in horror after hearing her words and still could not believe them. She assured him that if he agreed, he would keep 4 times more than he should be paid, becoming a knight. With her warm and determined look, she waited for his answer. The boy froze, trying to think over her proposal. The silent man stood up, holding her shoulders so she wouldn't fall. The girl already thought that he would refuse as he spoke here. Intrigued, the guy asked if it was exactly 4 times more. After all, he couldn't believe that she had so much money. The girl stood up and gave him her hand. Smiling brightly, she took his question for consent, also promising free accommodation. Lucia was over the moon with happiness, so she told him to follow her to show him his new workplace. However, the young lady did not know in which direction to go. Having decided to go to the right, they set off. The boy followed Lady Lucia silently. And at that moment, in the middle of the night, Alexander's screams were heard in the castle. Who could not believe that the young lady had disappeared? The irritated prince asked Linda where his half-sister had gone, so it was not possible to keep the secret, and Linda told that this morning my lady wanted to go for a walk to the city. The prince could not believe that his sister could do such a thing. Lucia has never been an ardent fan of walks, especially over such long distances and without a carriage. She hates going for walks in the city, because it is very noisy and crowded. But when he heard that she left alone, without a carriage and assistance, he was not at all worried. The governess apologized for allowing such a thing to happen. Theodore, meanwhile, became angry because he could not concentrate on the book and looked up. He was not satisfied with this noise, and he closed the book loudly, showing his bad mood. Sitting on a soft chair with gold decoration, the young prince believed that she was not going to kill herself in this way, which scared Alexander. The elder was angry with Theodore because of his frivolous attitude towards his older sister, especially in the presence of her future fiancé. Regarding the groom, the prince did not understand at all what he was doing here. The man did not know that the young lady still did not tell about the cancellation of the engagement. Alexander asked Linda to check her room again. Maybe she returned during their conversation. The prince still could not believe that the princess had not told such a big news to anyone. Maybe she still felt something for him, and she needed time, the young man thought. Meanwhile, the door opened and Lucia entered the room with an awkward smile. She was surprised to see Alexander here. There was silence in the room. All attention was focused on the girl in the white dress. She could not even imagine that all the main characters would gather in one room, which embarrassed her. Alexander immediately ran up to her. The girl did not expect that the older brother would be so worried. He lightly squeezed her shoulders and with fear in his eyes asked where she was. The girl, shocked by the fact that Alexander was really worried about her, could not say a word. He scolded her for going to the city for the whole day and by herself. No one knew what could happen. Meanwhile, a concentrated man passed by Theodore and put him in a stupor, while Alexander continued to teach the girl, saying that it is very dangerous outside now. A shadow appeared behind Lucia. The young man grabbed the elder prince's hand before he expected it, and the girl panicked because she didn't know what to say. He pressed the young lady to him with a light movement of his hand. No one expected this action. Alexander swayed to the side, and Theodore froze in place, not understanding what was happening. The ex-fiancé was enraged by this picture in front of his eyes. He did not understand what kind of man he was and why he was protecting Lucia. Alexander accidentally decided to cautiously ask what kind of husband his older sister brought to the castle. The girl said with a slight smile that this was her knight, while the boy behind him looked at her mysteriously, clutching his shoulder in protection. Returning to the young man in the black cape, she informed him that everything was fine, and that the man in front of him was not a danger at the moment. So, forgetting that she hadn't introduced the men to each other, she started dating. She introduced Alexander, who was her younger half-brother, to the man on the left, who is now Lucia's knight. A voice from her ex-fiancé came from the side. He couldn't understand if the boy was actually her personal knight and why she needed him. Facing each other, the men carefully examined each other, while Lucia was shocked to see her ex here, that is, His Highness. She wondered irritably why he was here. However, it was not worth showing her emotions, so she decided to show respect by bowing to him. But accidentally, as politely as possible, ask what he is doing here. Alexander was shocked by the intonation with which his sister allows herself to speak to her future bridegroom, especially the heir to the crown. Ignoring Lucia's question, he asked again if it was really her knight. The girl, not focusing on this, decided to introduce her husband to the knight. This is Prince Arthur Felix I. An irritated man interrupted her again. He didn't recall Lucia ever saying anything about her knight. It was very strange for him. As he understood, she was very confident in his abilities and could trust him with her life because she knows him well and can rely on him. The girl did not understand why there was such interest in her person. So, I decided to show something that really knows Sir as a shell. She assumed a comfortable pose so as not to betray her nervous state, and said that she knew this person well enough, although she didn't really know anything about him. The young man with snow-white hair understood that the girl was improvising, because she did not even know his name and doubted that she remembered him at all. However, he decided to play along, mentally considering it very witty. However, Arthur thought otherwise. He became darker than a storm cloud and could no longer listen to this. So to end this pointless conversation, I offered Lucia a walk to the garden. The shocked girl could not believe that he wanted her to go with him. It did not fit in her head. Kronprinz told his elder brother that their conversation was over for now, and when he had a free moment, he would come to continue it. Meanwhile, he extended his hand to the girl with a gesture inviting her for a walk. However, she ignored this movement. The men were embarrassed by such an act. On her way to the door, she passed the silent Theodore, who didn't say a word the whole time, just observed and memorized the details. She offered the knight to stay in the room in order to establish a connection and get to know her brothers better. But she went out into the corridor, slamming the door loudly. There was silence in the room. The blonde boy was embarrassed. The three men who remained in the room did not even understand what the connection was about, so it was so quiet in the room that you could hear a mosquito flying. There were more stars in the sky than on any other day. The noise of the fountain gave a mysterious atmosphere to this walk. Two young people walked slowly through the garden, looking back at the red roses. However, it was so embarrassing. For 15 minutes, no one started a conversation, so they wandered in silence, each thinking about his own. The girl was furious because she did not understand why Arthur had announced her boycott. Why did he ask her for a walk if he had nothing to talk about? The silence pressed on her, so she tried to think of a topic for further communication. There was not much choice, talking about the weather or who ate what today. So she will say that the weather is beautiful for a walk. This is enough for a start, and then how will it go? As soon as he adjusted himself, a cold wind blew, penetrating to the bones. Unfortunately, it got terribly cold in an instant. Lucia felt like she was walking with penguins in the Antarctic. Covering herself with her hands, she felt sad, because until this moment she really had been wonderful. Of course, the crown prince noticed the girl shivering from the cold. So he stopped abruptly on the path, covering fragile Lucia with himself. The girl's eyes widened as soon as she saw that the prince was removing the cape from his shoulders. In the middle of the fairy garden, near the rose bed, two people stood in silence while the man put his thing on the lady's shoulders. The girl, not expecting such an act from Arthur, lost her speech. Everything around seemed to be silent from such a tender moment. A few seconds later, the man admitted that it was very cold outside and she should return to the royal castle. Their eyes could not tear themselves away from each other for several seconds, and then the man decided that they could talk next time. Leaving the girl alone, he took one last look with a hint of sadness at her face and wished her sweet dreams. Opening her mouth in surprise, Lucia continued to stay in place and even forgot about the cold wind that prevented her from relaxing. The lady was confused by the behavior and words of the crown prince, because when they broke off the engagement, he shone like a diamond in the sun. Wandering alone near a lake on which lilies were floating here and there, the girl did not understand why the prince came to the castle at all. His demeanor, now very different from the last time they saw each other, misled her. The way he looked, his action in connection with the cold weather, it all seemed so strange and so unlike Arthur. Due to the fact that Lucia was deep in thought, she did not notice how she hit a tree. However, The obstacle that the young lady encountered was soft and much warmer than a tree. Looking up, she noticed her now personal knight in front of her, covering the mighty moon behind him and carefully observing the girl's emotions. Picking herself up, she mumbled a quick question as to what he was doing here, as she had told him to stay inside and spend time with his brothers. Since she did not return for a long time, he began to worry. Therefore, as a personal bodyguard, he should always be with her. The girl smiled lightly and assured him, indeed, now he must always be by her side and protect her from any obstacles. Inadvertently, the girl remembered that she had not even told her name during the entire time she had met the knight. Therefore, I decided that it was time to get acquainted. The guy allowed to address him simply as Noah, so the girl decided to make a joke on him by repeating these two words. It is certain that the young man did not appreciate the joke. He remained standing with a stony expression on his face until the girl realized that the boy did not understand this kind of prank. Lucia began to blame herself for the stupid joke. What was wrong with her? Why did she tell him this? Only these thoughts were spinning in the girl's head. Feeling awkward, she remained silent. The boy watched the girl's behavior with side vision. Therefore, he decided to interrupt the flow of her thoughts by saying that if you pay attention to the situation in the room, they have known each other for a long time. The girl remembered what happened recently and apologized for her lie. She didn't want to lie, but that's how things turned out. Before she forgets, she will ask the butler to prepare a room for Noah, because he is 100% tired after a hard and fruitful day. It was getting colder and colder. The girl could not hold back and sneezed loudly. However, instead of the touch of the cold wind, she felt the second black cape falling on her head this evening. Glancing at the boy who pretended nothing was happening, she was pleasantly surprised. How good that he became her personal knight after all. He is the best and most attentive from all sides. The night was slowly changing to a warm, sunny morning. Leaves were already falling from the trees, and a warm wind was driving him down. The young lady spent her morning in the garden among fragrant flowers and beautiful landscapes. Linda approached the table where Lucia was resting and held a small envelope in her hands, attracting the girl's attention. She reported that an invitation to the royal banquet had arrived this morning. After all, how could she forget? This is the same festive gathering where they will announce the break-off of the engagement and the cancellation of the wedding. Linda also reminded me about the last dress fitting. The assistant tried to support the girl in a loving way, mentioning the accessories and jewelry that should be chosen for the dress so that the crown prince could not take his eyes off her. Oh, if Linda only knew what was really going to happen at the banquet. But with what a joyful voice the prince will inform the guests about the cancellation of the wedding. However, taking into account how he dislikes her, this is logical. So very soon the time will come when everyone will know the truth. Now she's not afraid because she has him, Noah. For several weeks in a row, the guy is always next to her but hardly speaks. He looks like a security guard. The most important thing is that she really feels safe with Noah. And recently, she often catches gods because the fact that the knight is next to her saves her from falling. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, which blew the handkerchief from her head, which was now swirling in the air. The girl almost fell off her chair from surprise, because when she saw what the scarf was caught on, she was scared to death. Theodore, who also decided to visit the garden, looked in surprise at the thing that flew right into his hands. He got angry and bit his lip in order not to say too much. It was a pleasant surprise for the governess to see the young prince in the kindergarten, so she offered him to drink tea while there was not a cloud in the sky. The boy squinted and gave the girl a contemptuous look. He barely restrained his emotions so as not to express his displeasure. Suddenly, behind Theodore, lightning flashed in the sky, which diffused the situation between the young people. The girl decided to try her luck, even if her hands were shaking with fear, and offered him some tea in a whisper with an uncertain smile on her face. The boy's eyes almost popped out of his forehead from surprise. He didn't know if Lucia was joking or if she really wanted to drink tea together, but he will not tolerate such insolent behavior. With a light wave of his hand, he threw the handkerchief down and wondered why he would want to have tea with her in broad daylight. After all, he is even sick of looking at her and being in the same castle with her, so there is no question of any gatherings together. The guy went away and the girl remained sitting in thought. Of course, she understood why the youngest of the brothers treated her like that. After all, it was because of Lucia that his childhood was ruined. But still, it was unpleasant, so she likes to change it. Linda offered to go to the castle because the weather was starting to deteriorate. Therefore, getting up from the chair, The girl went forward. Dark clouds filled the entire sky and black crows were already circling above the castle. The girl, her hair blowing in the wind, walked slowly towards the palace. Noah, who was contemplating this picture, got down on one knee to pick up a small handkerchief in his hands. Even without knowing the whole situation, he also felt sorry for the girl. After all, looking at the emotional pain it brings her, he cannot just look at it and not sympathize with her. With her back straight so as not to show her depressed state, the girl held her dress and made her way to the castle until the weather became angry. And the black clouds painted more and more the empty canvas that towered over the palace. Leaves swirled in a dance between low-flying birds, indicating worsening weather. It started to shine. The birds flocked together to stick together, but there was one person who stood out from the crowd. In the luxurious room, which was filled with books, there was a wide-open window. A young, fair-haired boy, leaning against the railing, watched this picture, thinking about something else entirely. His thoughts were still swirling around Lucia's suggestion to have tea together. How could she mock him like that by suggesting such things? Is she trying to use him for selfish purposes? In addition, she recently had a personal night, although she had never had one before. After all, every time her father offered her such a thing, she threw a tantrum and chased away all the people who tried to calm her down. For what reason did Lucia so drastically change her attitude to everything, her manner of communication, and in general, she changed herself? This puzzled and annoyed him. It just sounded funny. After all, people never change, and it has always been like that. A familiar bird, a falcon, flew slowly to the window, especially people who look like his half-sister, or maybe the fact is that she began to guess about something. Before he could finish his thought, the boy got scared as soon as he heard the bird. The blue-winged bird. The postman landed gracefully on the bottom of the books. Heaving a heavy sigh, the boy looked at him unkindly, because his thoughts were interrupted and he wondered what was going on this time. Who needed to send a letter by bird at such a late hour, especially when the storm was raging outside? Taking it in his hands, he looked in surprise at the name with which it was signed. It was a letter from Lucia, but why send the link if her room is right next to his? It was very dramatic and pissed off the already irritated boy. Unfolding the letter, the boy took it in his hands and began to read. What was written did not frighten him, but rather surprised him. Slowly lowering his hands downwards, the letter fell from his relaxed palm directly onto the carpet. The letter contained several pages on which Lucia wrote an appeal to her father and dear brothers. She was sure they were desperate because of her disappearance a few weeks ago. The storm raged in Theodore's soul even more than outside the window. A heavy downpour hit the windowsill loudly, causing a noise. Small snowflakes circling in the sky announced the beginning of a frosty winter. A young girl, leaning against the window in a long crimson dress, watched this work of art circling right outside her window. So, in the letter, Lucia reported that the day had started well. She set out again to see the Crown Prince because she missed him very much. However, the carriage never arrived. They were stopped in a spooky forest where the bare branches of the trees created terrifying silhouettes at night. A rude man covered the girl's face with a glove. The tears did not stop falling while the thieves were considering whether to take her for a good profit. She was scared. Standing on her knees with her hands tied, the helpless girl did not know how to live on. After many days at sea, they stopped on land. Lucia thought it was the northern part of the kingdom, but she wasn't sure. The snow-covered city greeted them in silence and cold. Everyone was preparing for New Year's holidays and burning houses. Somehow she managed to escape just after they reached land. Barefoot in the snow, despite the cold, the girl continued to run even through the pain. However, the weakened girl, who had not eaten for several days, could not run far. She fell down without strength and felt alone in this unknown place for her.